Hey guys, Professor Bill, Comic Book University, and Captain Marvel issue number 34. I have a tweet. I'd like to read a tweet. It's not by me. It's by this person named Kelly Thompson. The frick this person is. Anyway, she says, last warning, if you don't already have it in your poll, get to your shops early tomorrow. Captain Marvel issue number 34 has some big surprises and changes coming, and they start here. What are those changes? Well, I haven't been reading the comic book, so I'm not entirely sure, but I can guess. And I can say me likey. Also, me can see the source of these changes. Oh, I love it when a plan comes together. Hannibal, A-Team, anyway. Let's talk about who made this comic book. We'll move on from there. Writer is Kelly Thompson. Oh, that Kelly Thompson. Oh, the tweet. Okay, anyway. Artist Sergio Davila. Inks by Sean Parsons, colors by Jesus Abertov, and letters by VC's Clayton Cowles. The cover artists are Iban Coelho and Jesus Abertov. Variant covers, there's only two, which is actually really good for a Marvel comic. Simone Bianchi, not sure, never met her, and Stanley Artgerm Lau. Artgerm? Crap, I thought he was regulated to everything else but Marvel. I thought that Marvel was just like, we've got Alex Ross, we don't need Artgerm, and lies! Everybody needs some damn Artgerm in their life. Sons of guns anyway. Got to check out that variant cover. I haven't seen it yet. But if I can find it when I'm doing the editing for this video, hey, I'll throw it in there. You'll see in a minute if I actually found it. Anyway, let's start talking about the very first page of the comic book after you get past the cover. The Last of the Marvels, part 3 of this run. So I didn't read part 1 and 2. Did I understand this comic book? Hell's yes, because I read the foreword. I didn't read the first 2 issues of this comic book, and I haven't read several issues prior to that also, right? The last time I did a review of this comic book, or this series, is the last time that I read a Captain Marvel comic book. It's not that it's not a fun comic book to read. It's just I'm doing way too much in my life right now, and I'm grabbing the trade paperbacks as they come out. I'm still supporting Kelly. I'm still supporting, the comics that I like from Marvel. I will always do that. That being said, God dang. I can't follow this episodically like that. I just can't do that. I've got to devote time to reading my comic books nowadays. But I opened this up and I read this forward, and I feel like I've read every single one of the comic books. Aside from little inside jokes and things like that, I've read all of this stuff, right? It's just like I read all the previous issues. This is not a jumping on point. However, it is an artificial jumping on point. If this is the first time you're ever reading a Captain Marvel or even a Marvel comic book, you will not be lost. At worst, you will look at this and say, I don't know some of these names. Who is Vox, right? No, this is more than that. This is, I think that you'll be able to jump on this comic book just fine. There may be a little static, there may be a little friction in there, but you will be just fine jumping on this comic book for the first time. I'm positive of that. The front page, the first page of this comic book, it is extremely aesthetically beautiful, very pleasing to the eye. I look at this, the color scheme is perfect, one color on here besides the hues and shades of black and white, respectively. Anyway, whatever. I don't want to focus too much on this. I love this opening page. Just reading this front page of the comic book is like taking a master class in writing comic books. If you nail this, people can read your comic books and there's no issues from that point on, except the issue numbers. Anyhow, I read this comic book and it takes me back to the Marvel superheroes role-playing games that came out that were released by TSR in 1984 and on. And there was a story mission in there, Day of the Octopus, and it was fantastic. Why am I talking about this stuff? It's related. And in it, Captain Marvel, Monica Rambeau was Captain Marvel at the time. Nowadays, she's called Spectrum. Who's in this comic book. Anyway, Monica Rambeau gets put into a scenario, a death trap. All right, it's called a death trap. She's put in a box, right? It's not blasted off into space, but it's a box, and it's pitch black inside. And if a player decides to just be hasty and turn into some kind of an energy and blast her way out of the box, well, she's in for a wicked surprise, because if she would have just simply lit up her finger alone, then the player character would have realized that the inside of this box is actually all mirrors. and turning into a full body energy form would have caused Captain Marvel to endlessly reflect faster than, or as fast as the speed of light, literally, too fast for her to be able to slow down or change her composition. She would have been stuck in that death trap until someone would have come by and rescued her, right? So you'd have to be smart and take a look first and then maybe turn into, like, alpha, beta, or gamma energy and phase right through the damn thing. So I love the callback to that. Is this a callback to that? Occam's razor, man. I'm going to go with Occam's razor. The most likely candidate is probably it. And something that damns it even more, but not in a bad way, is that the thing that Carol is talking about, the turning point for Carol Danvers in this book, is that she uses what has been called in the Marvel superheroes role-playing game system a power stunt. So we don't like it when a character gets a brand new power that doesn't make any kind of sense, right? If Storm is able to suddenly control the Earth, there's a problem. People get pissed off at that, right? If Ben Grimm suddenly starts shooting laser beams out of his eyes, we're going to get pissed at that. So we're going to say this is stupid, and we're just going to stop. We're going to drop the comic book, and we're going to move on, right? But a power stunt is different. Back in the early Claremont days when Storm was and the X-Men were fighting against Juggernaut for the first time, the new X-Men, the all different X-Men. Storm was all sorts of dizzy and messed up because she was in a claustrophobic situation. The castle fell on her for too long. She came out, she tries to get her wits about her, and she goes and she, instead of calling down the lightning to strike Juggernaut, she just uses a weaker form of it, and she causes the atmospheric pressure changes so that she can summon lightning just off of, the static electricity of her body and just, wow, like that. Doesn't work, but it's the idea that we see that she's using her powers in a different way. I don't want to see the Thing being able to suddenly manipulate wind or the weather himself. But it makes sense if somebody as huge as the Thing, Ben Grimm, with the constitution he has, to be able to, huff and puff and big bad wolf a miniature hurricane like a dust devil, you know what I'm saying? And cause the bad guys to get blown away fairly harmlessly. Things like that make sense. That's a power stunt as opposed to a brand new power. I love that. Absolutely love that. It's something that the Marvel superheroes, it's very Dungeons and Dragons, but with Marvel superheroes. And I loved it. Marvel superheroes role-playing game. You can actually see me doing the most popular videos on YouTube about those, about that game. I actually did those. You can find them on this channel. Just do a look for it. Anyway, I see Carol using power stunts in here. I personally have never seen her use the shield arm before. Maybe she has. I don't know. I've never seen it before, so it's new to me at least. And something like that makes sense. Instead of just like she's generating the power, doesn't it make sense that she should also be able to control it also with some effort? And there was some strain in here. You saw, you got talked through how she did this stuff, and it was very engaging how it happened in here, right? I loved that idea. I absolutely loved the idea of how this comic book was taking place. She gets out of the death trap in a very interesting way. I hate the idea of doing a spoiler, so I'm going to hold my hand up, and while my hand is up, that means I'm telling you the spoiler. So mute this thing or take the earbuds out, whatever, okay? When I put my hand down, the spoiler's over. I'm just going to continue on. So here we go. Go away. She uses her powers to form an energy doppelganger. Now, it's not actually becoming binary, but it looks like binary. That's the explanation was perfect on here. It looks like binary, her binary form, but it's just an energy doppelganger. So she's taking like half or maybe more, whatever, of her power out of her and causing this to happen. And that causes so she can actually do like a pressure kind of thing, whatever, and she's able to get out. However it worked and it was awesome. Okay, spoiler, finished. I love the idea that she did that. And that is a power stunt, right? It's not dissimilar from the powers that she already has. It's simply a more concentrated use of her powers. It's a smarter way of using her powers that almost appears to be a new power without it actually being a new power, right? So she doesn't have to be bitten by a radioactive bugbear and suddenly, there's another D&D reference for you, and suddenly she can, propel herself through space using the power of her farts alone. right? Like, I don't want to see nonsense like that. I'm sure some people want it. There's a whole section on Pornhub about stuff like that, I believe. But anyway, we're here. We're here right now, okay? I loved this. I loved this. So many writers fall into the trap of just repeating themselves or repeating somebody else's work, right? I mentioned before Julius Schwartz, the guy who 10 or 12 years, depending on how you look at his run as the publisher for for DC Comics, he's very famous for saying to his writers all the time, yeah, don't bother going crazy with writing stuff. Just go back and look at what happened 5 years ago and write all that stuff, because readers only stay on for about 5 years anyway, and then they get bored with comic books and they move on. They grow up, right? And they move on. So you can repeat the stories and nobody's going to notice. When in reality, we know that this was actually just the tail wagging the dog. By repeating the stories, it caused the people who've been reading for 5 or more years to recognize these stories and realize that they don't want to spend their money just rereading the exact same stories with the exact same characters. So they just stopped reading comic books, or at least stopped reading DC Comics for that reason. It's one of the main reasons why Marvel Comics exploded and became so much larger than DC was, like so much larger. I know there are a lot of Marvel writers, even some artists, but the writers especially, there's a lot of writers who get really toxic and they get upset when they hear somebody say, comics were better when I was a kid. I understand they're going to take it a little bit personally, but for the most part, there's a reason for it. If you're my age, you grew up during the Jim Shooter era, right? And then immediately afterwards, where Marvel just kind of broke the bank and they had the most profitable year ever, but then went the exact opposite way, and 2 years later, they declared bankruptcy, right? Technically 3 years later, but the signs were there 2 years later. We all saw it. We all saw it. So, yeah, when people my age or around my age say comics were better when we were kids, it's true. And the proof is there. It's not just a nostalgia thing. It's very different. So when I see and those writers who have said things like that, they're typically not on Twitter anymore. And they'll say, people are so toxic. Bud, you just got finished insulting your fans, and then you're claiming that the fans are toxic because they don't like what you just said about them? Tail wagging the dog. It's funny how that happens. Personal responsibility allows you to realize the source of all things. Kelly, I've never seen her repeat a story. While I do believe that she took most of the idea, not most, but many of the ideas from this comic book from the Marvel Superheroes role-playing game, I don't begrudge her in the slightest bit, because she's not taking it from the comic books. She's taking it from a comic book central medium, but it's not from the comics. Excuse me, she's not repeating anything that has been done in the comic books before. I've never seen that. Meanwhile, she is still using some of the tropes like the death trap to very good use, to making you believe, is this the end for our hero? Well, no, but we know that the hero is going to get out, but how are they going to get out of this situation? I can't wait to find out, right? It's very rare to find a writer like that. Go figure. Kelly knows comics. I mean, I've said this many times before, but it's true, right? If Kelly Thompson were to write a graphic novel and put it on the other end of a tightrope, I'm saying there's a biscuit and I'm going to risk it for said biscuit. Now, I didn't say how high the damn tightrope has to be, because if it's really high, I don't know. I've seen freaking Tom and Jerry when I was a kid. You put a glass of water or a wet sponge on the bottom and then I'll be okay. That's how real life works, right? Anyway, I would probably risk it. I would sit there and look at that comic book and I'd be thinking to myself, how do I get across this tightrope without actually dying? But I really want to see that trade paperback. I want to see that graphic novel. You know what I'm saying? That's who Kelly is. She writes something and you right away start thinking, got to fit this into my disposable income because I got to read this. And it's very rare to find a writer who can pull off something like that. And Kelly just does it book after book after book, and I love it. Again, if I had more time in my life to just read episodically these comic books, I would. I absolutely would. And Kelly would be at the absolute pinnacle of my list right now. Higher than any other writer who's out there right now who's writing their own stuff. I would be reading Kelly Thompson's books episodically. All of them. I just can't. You know, say I've got to get the trade paperbacks and support her and, you know, my favorite comic books that way, and then devote time to read all my comic books at one time or a couple littered times, lunch break sometimes. Anyway, yeah, I've gone corporate. All right. I'm taking my freaking my immigration consultation services to the highest bidder, and I'm making really freaking good money doing it. But unfortunately, I had to go corporate in order to do it. It happens. It happens. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, I'm the corporate professor now, damn it. But I'm still finding time to read my books. And like I said, Kelly's at the top of the list exactly for that reason. Guys, just shut up and go get the comic book. It's really as simple as that. This is some of the best reading that you're going to find, some of the most innovative stuff. Again, I don't begrudge Kelly at all. If she did, she probably did. Take this stuff from the 1984 Marvel Superheroes basic set, the original yellow box. I don't blame her at all. I don't begrudge her at all. In fact, I applaud her and commend her for it, because it's the perfect way to just take what's already out there and literally make it your own. This was a fantastic read. Should I talk about the art? Why not? Let's just really quickly talk about the idea that some of the best in the business are, you know, I almost feel like it's redundant, right? Everybody who's anybody knows. If you see Jesus Abertov on colors on a comic book, it's going to be top quality, like S tier level comic book art. I don't care who else is out there. Anything that Jesus Abertov does is automatically upgraded to S tier, right? It's the highest that's going to get. It's better than getting an A+ in school. God damn it. As far as everybody else who's on this comic book, just their names again really quick. Sergio Davila. Never heard of Sergio. I don't think I've ever heard of Sergio before. Sean Parsons. I know I've heard of Sean on inks before. I can't recall where though, you know. But I sit here, I look at this stuff, and I don't need to know anything about these writers. I know that Marvel trusts Kelly so much that if she asks for an artist, she's probably going to get him. She's probably going to get that artist. And if she doesn't ask for anybody specifically, Marvel isn't going to just say, well, here's some crappy artist who, you know, needs a little work. They're not going to do that. Why? Because it's Kelly freaking Thompson. And that's just that. That's just that. Guys, there's absolutely no reason on earth for you to not grab this comic book. Fantastic writing, fantastic art, fantastic book, and fantastic cover page. Again, just that is how you write a comic book. If I had to make any complaint, it would be that there's one point where a thing was referenced in here. I'm not going to give the spoiler on it, but a thing was referenced and there was no asterisk and editor's note saying, hey, such and such and such happened here. I don't know if, you know, which editor that was supposed to be, but somebody screwed up. Editors, learn how to find. If the writer is writing about it, they probably know where you can find it if you don't know. If not, hey, look, Tom Brevoort is your editor, your executive editor. I'll bet you he knows. This guy's a freaking encyclopedia for Marvel stuff, right? Comics in general, actually, because I've seen him talk about more than just that. All of them. C.B. Cebulski, right? That guy. Forget about it. Forget about it. Anyway. Boom. The editors have to work on that. Aside from that, everybody did a fantastic job in this comic book, and I love it. I'm out. Like the video, watch an ad. Professor Bill, Comic Book University. Class dismissed.